Welcome to the channel where powerful stories come to life. Get ready for truth, emotion, and transformation, one story at a time. Some people believe that only those wearing expensive suits and carrying a prestigious last name deserve to be on stage. And if someone shows up in simple clothes, they're immediately seen as a helper, an onlooker, or, at best, part of the audience. But life loves to turn the tables. And sometimes the person you try to humiliate is exactly the one who'll teach you the most profound lesson of your life. That's what happened with Clara, a quiet young woman, modest in appearance, with a talent so rare that not even the most renowned conservatory could recognize it, until she played. This story isn't just about music. It's about side eyes, rushed judgments, and a system that still thinks worth is measured by labels. But what Clara did with a piano, oh my friend, no diploma in the world could ever explain. And the best part? You won't leave this video just moved. You'll leave with a new way of seeing people. Because true talent doesn't make noise, but when it shows itself, it silences even the most arrogant in the room. No one expected that quiet morning at the conservatory to become the stage for one of the greatest stories ever lived there. Clara, with her hair tied back in a simple bun and a worn-out dress, barely drew attention. She was just accompanying her younger sister. But that alone was enough to spark the disdainful looks of some professors, who confused humility with inability. And when they suggested, with that voice dripping in irony, that she sit at the piano, it wasn't an invitation. It was a test disguised as mockery. Sadly, that kind of scene still echoes in many places. It's like walking into a bookstore and being asked, "Are you lost?" Or visiting a luxury store and hearing, "The prices are in the window, okay?" Prejudice today wears a suit and speaks politely, but the poison remains the same. Clara wasn't just a spectator. She was someone with a story pounding in her chest. And those who carry a strong story don't need to raise their voice. They just need a space. The most ironic part of these moments is that the trap set to humiliate someone often becomes the very lesson. Have you noticed how certain provocations disguised as kindness reveal more about the provocator than the victim? The attempt to expose Clara said little about her, but said everything about them. And they had no idea that this so-called simple gesture was about to unleash a turnaround that would transform not just that room, but the entire conservatory. What the professors didn't know, and didn't bother to imagine, was that Clara wasn't a curious amateur. Since the age of 6, she had studied with a retired Russian maestro who lived in her neighborhood. While other children played outside, Clara spent hours deciphering sheet music and practicing complex scales. She had already won international competitions, the kind that demand more than just technique. They require soul. But life, as we know, has its own tempo, and hers changed drastically after her mother's death. After losing her mother, Clara had to give it all up. The stage, scholarships, travels, trophies. She chose to care for her younger sister, to wash laundry for extra money, to give private lessons just to pay the bills. And even in the midst of that harsh routine, music never left her. Like a story that refuses to be forgotten, it kept pulsing through every gesture, every silence. That's how life teaches us. Talent doesn't always live in the spotlight. Sometimes it survives in the improvised rhythms of a kitchen. How many Claras do you know? Talented people who never had a stage but have always been a show on their own. And the most beautiful part? They don't ask for recognition. They just don't want to be erased. So the next time you see someone in simple clothes or with tired eyes, remember, you might be standing in front of an extraordinary story. And that's exactly what began to surface when Clara, with a gentle nod, walked toward the piano. When Clara sat at the piano, there wasn't an audience. There was expectation cloaked in disdain. The professors crossed their arms, the students whispered, and someone even chuckled softly in the back. But she didn't react. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and with the first note, the sound filled the room like lightning piercing through silence. It wasn't just technique. It was memory, pain, resilience, an entire story told without words. The notes flowed as if they were alive. Chopin had never sounded so human. It was as if each key was saying, "Look again, listen for real." And they did. Slowly, the laughter faded. The sarcastic professor froze, and the phones, once used for memes, began recording in total silence. No one wanted to miss the moment when the world seemed to stop just to hear Clara play. It's fascinating how real talent doesn't need microphones, spotlights, or labels. It just needs an opening. And Clara found hers in the heart of an elitist conservatory, using only what she had: courage, story, and art. That moment became a seed, and it was about to bloom far beyond those walls, carrying a story no one could ignore. The video of her performance spread like wildfire. Within hours, it was circulating in musicians' WhatsApp groups, conservatory forums, and even reached international education pages. The captions were all similar: "Humble girl humbles elitism with pure talent." And just like that, Clara, who barely used social media, found herself at the center of an unexpected wave of recognition. Her story was no longer a secret. It had become public inspiration. Invitations began pouring in: TV shows, renowned festivals, interviews on musical podcasts. But the most powerful part wasn't the fame, it was the impact. People who never saw themselves represented in the classical world now felt included. Young people from underserved communities began sharing the video, saying, "Look, this could be my sister." Because stories like Clara's give people permission to dream. And more than that, they prove that dreams don't need a pedigree. The truth is, when a door opens for someone who's been invisible, it never opens alone. It knocks down many around it. The conservatory, once proud and exclusive, had to face its own bubble. And the board knew they could no longer pretend nothing had happened. Clara's story was already bigger than any classroom, and erasing it would mean rethinking the institution's very foundations. The buzz was so strong that the conservatory's leadership had to act. They could no longer sweep the embarrassment under the rug. In an emergency meeting, where they usually discussed tuning schedules, the topics now were empathy, inclusion, and listening. The director, visibly shaken, declared that talent doesn't come in uniforms. It comes in stories. And if the school didn't change, it would lose its very reason for existing. In the weeks that followed, new scholarships were created for students from underprivileged communities. Partnerships were established with music NGOs, and most symbolically, a new training module was launched for the teachers themselves. In it, they studied cases of prejudice, listened to real experiences from students and alumni who had been ignored because of how they looked or where they came from. It was a shock. Many admitted they had never realized the weight of their own words. But as I always say, it's not enough to teach music. We must learn to hear the stories behind the sheet music. Of course, change faced resistance. Some claimed it was an overreaction, or that teaching had become political, as if empathy were the enemy of technique. But the transformation had already begun, and when culture starts shifting from within, there's no going back. Clara's story became part of the new curriculum, and that began to trigger something even deeper in the school's hallways. During a general assembly, something unexpected happened. One of the most traditional professors, the very one who had proposed the challenge to Clara, asked to speak. With a trembling voice and downcast eyes, he said, "Today I learned more in 5 minutes listening to Clara than I have in 5 years teaching." No one breathed. The room went silent. It was the kind of sentence that doesn't need to be repeated. It sticks to your skin and becomes memory. A story of late humility, but a powerful one. The words spread like symbolic fire. They became murals, posts, and hashtags. Students tattooed the phrase onto notebooks, and even onto t-shirts. It wasn't about idolizing Clara. It was about recognizing that everyone has something to teach, even if they don't have a diploma hanging on the wall. It's amazing how a single sentence said at the right moment can reshape the culture of a place. And once again, the histories proved that the most powerful lessons are the ones that dismantle us from within. This turning point inspired other teachers to revisit their own paths. Some shared mistakes from the past. Others revealed that they too came from humble families, but had forgotten that after climbing a few steps in their careers, the environment, once filled with vanity, began to open space for something rarer: truth. And it's curious how this kind of environment becomes fertile ground for new talents to blossom. Just like a certain unexpected invitation that was about to arrive for Clara. A few days after that remarkable assembly, Clara received an official invitation from the board. They wanted her to deliver a keynote lecture in the main auditorium. It was too symbolic to decline. The same young woman who once entered as a shadow was now stepping onto the stage as a beacon. She accepted, of course, but on one condition. She wanted students from underprivileged areas to attend too, because histories, like hers, weren't born to be secrets. They were born to multiply courage. The lecture was an event, Clara didn't speak about scales or sheet music. She spoke about loss, persistence, and a quiet love for art. She showed that technique is merely a bridge, but it's the soul that crosses it. A producer who attended offered to turn her journey into a book and a documentary. And just like that, almost unintentionally, Clara became the symbol of a new era. People from everywhere wrote to her saying, "Your history is just like mine. Thank you for representing me." The impact went beyond glamour. Clara began receiving messages from young people on the verge of giving up, from teachers in existential crisis, from mothers raising children with artistic gifts. She became more than an example. She became a reference point for transformation without fanfare. And even with all that, she kept her feet firmly on the ground. Because, as we'll see next, there was something even more beautiful in her decision. While many sought the top, Clara chose to serve. Despite the sudden fame, the international invitations and the offers that would make any artist rethink their career, Clara chose a different path, a path less lit by spotlights, but deeply illuminated by the light of awareness. While specialized magazines featured her name and critics praised her flawless technique, she returned to the same neighborhood where she first learned how to dream, not for lack of ambition, but because she had a greater one, to truly transform lives. Histories, like hers, are not born by accident, and according to her, they shouldn't die on grand stages either. She declined trips to Europe, performances in prestigious venues, and contracts that demanded exclusivity. People said she was throwing her career away. But Clara believed in a different kind of career, one not measured by numbers, but by the quiet impact left on others. She preferred to keep living with her sister, caring for their simple home with a veranda and ferns on the windowsill, where the piano stood in the living room, accessible to everyone. That's where she felt whole, because that's where the histories began again, every day in the hands of those who never had the chance to write their own. Clara started giving volunteer lessons at a community project in a nearby neighborhood. Most students came from underserved communities, children and teens who often didn't even know what a piano was. She never began with technique. She taught from the heart. She showed them the sound before the symbol, helped each student find a note that represented their own history. Music is most beautiful when shared with those who've never had a voice, she repeated like a mantra. Because for Clara, beauty wasn't in flawless execution, but in the truth that echoed. It was common to see her on a Saturday afternoon, sitting on makeshift wooden stools surrounded by laughing children. A little boy with greasy fingers from eating street food clumsily tried to repeat a scale. Beside him, a grieving elderly woman attempted to compose a simple melody in tribute to a son she had lost. For Clara, those moments were more precious than any gala applause. It was there, in the everyday and improvisation, in the vulnerability of each gesture, that the most genuine histories were born. She used to say that talent without sharing is vanity, that virtuosity without affection becomes nothing but empty spectacle. Clara carried a conviction few artists dared to hold. The stage isn't the only place for greatness. Life is the hardest stage of all because there's no rehearsal, and it demands presence. And it was exactly that presence she offered others. Every note she played with her students carried intention. Every silence was an invitation to listen, and every mistake was embraced as part of someone's learning. History. She refused multiple invitations to perform at elitist events, where the first rows were reserved for the few, and the last had no chairs at all. "I don't play in places where there's no room for the invisible," she said firmly. And when they tried to convince her with absurd fees, Clara would ask, how many of these children could study music with that money? Her commitment was to the collective, not the glamour. She wanted more than to be celebrated. She wanted to be useful, to be part of other people's histories, not just remembered for one. Some said she was wasting her talent, that she could have been a global star. But Clara knew that some stars shine far from sight, and those are the ones that truly change the constellations of real life. She believed that real success wasn't public recognition, but quiet impact. It's not about how many hands clap for you, but how many hearts you reach. So while many asked where she'd perform next season, she focused on something else, how to plant seeds that would bloom after she was gone. That concern became action. Clara began training other volunteer teachers, mentoring young musicians from her project to become multipliers. She created a small teaching manual, handwritten, with personal notes on how to teach with empathy. The title was simple but powerful, Listening with the Heart. It had no rigid formulas, just emotional guidance based on her own experience and the histories she witnessed in every lesson, in every failed attempt by a child who, with time and care, became an artist. She also founded a group called Living Notes, made up of former students who performed at nursing homes, hospitals, public schools, and even bus stops. The goal was simple: bring music to places where no one expects to be moved by it. Some places just need a melody to breathe again, she'd say. And it was on those improvised stages, often ignored by society, that the deepest histories were born. It was there that tears flowed without shame. Applause didn't demand technique, only presence. And perhaps the most impressive thing of all was her humility. Clara never wanted her name to be bigger than her mission. She declined tributes that placed her on a pedestal. She preferred to be seen as a bridge, not a destination. When a child said, "I want to play like you," she would smile and reply, "Don't play like me, play like you. Your history has music too." That was the freedom she offered. The freedom to express yourself, to exist with dignity, to be heard without needing to prove anything. Over time, her actions began to inspire other cities. Similar projects were created in distant regions, using her model as a foundation. Clara never charged a cent for it. She shared everything: sheet music, methods, ideas, because she believed knowledge only matters when it sparks movement. And for her, movement meant change. Change in lives. Change in mindset. Change in the systems that keep trying to silence people like her. That's how her histories spread, quietly, but powerfully. And even with the recognition that followed, awards, news coverage, mentions in books, Clara remained the same. She kept riding the bus with students, brewing coffee for volunteers, cleaning the floors of the community recital hall, because she knew that true greatness doesn't need a stage, it needs consistency. And consistency for her meant living what she preached. Teaching is a way to keep learning, she used to say. And her classes were more than music lessons. They were life lessons that became histories never to be forgotten. In the end, Clara never aimed to change the whole world. She just wanted to change someone's world, and do it as many times as possible. She knew music could be a key, a bridge, a light. And if even one child discovered their worth by playing a single note, all the effort would have been worth it. Because when it comes down to it, true revolutions don't make noise. They begin when someone chooses to love what they do, serve with what they have, and believe in the histories no one else is telling. A few months after that unforgettable day, the conservatory woke up changed. Still silent, as it always was in the early hours of the morning, but with a detail that made all the difference. At the entrance of one of the most prestigious rooms, the one where for so long only names of renowned and traditionally celebrated masters were honored, a new plaque had been installed. In elegant lettering it read, "Clara Martin's Room, in honor of the one who taught us to listen with the heart." It wasn't just a plaque, it was a gesture of reparation. As if, at last, the institution was ready to listen, not only to the sounds of music but to the stories that had long been ignored. It was the first time that the name of a black woman from humble beginnings shone at the entrance of a space that had, for decades, prided itself on its impenetrable walls. The tribute, though simple to inattentive eyes, was revolutionary. It tore through decades of elitism and veiled prejudice, boldly declaring, "Here, soul matters just as much as a diploma." The impact didn't take long to spread. The conservatory, long known for its technical rigor and unquestionable tradition, suddenly became a symbol of change. Clara's story, once whispered in the hallways with embarrassment by some teachers, was now told aloud, with pride and admiration. More than that, it became part of the official curriculum, not as an isolated case or an inspiring anecdote, but as a reference, a milestone, a new foundation. Because stories, like this, aren't footnotes, they are pillars. The room named after her quickly became a gathering place. Young students, once intimidated by the conservatory's weight, now felt they belonged. Some even said they only stepped inside because they saw Clara's name on the door. Suddenly that cold, distant environment became more human, more accessible, more possible. Teachers noted with surprise that students were more engaged, more curious, more alive in class. And many humbly admitted that they had completely rethought how they evaluated talent and dedication. More than a tribute, Clara's story became a model. Other schools, inspired by the conservatory's gesture, began adopting similar practices. Institutions that had long ignored unconventional journeys started including the lives and work of overlooked musicians in their curricula. As one emotional principal said during a conference, "What Clara showed us is that it's not enough to teach music. We must teach how to listen." And the most beautiful part? Clara never demanded any of this. She never gave fiery speeches, never asked for applause. She simply showed up, dressed modestly, with a light step, a calm demeanor, and a deep gaze. And just by being herself, she touched something far beyond piano keys. She touched consciousness. She awakened questions. She broke down walls. Her silence, full of dignity, echoed louder than any microphone. Her legacy, therefore, isn't measured in trophies or awards. It lies in the seeds. Invisible seeds she planted that day, now blooming in places we never imagined. Seeds that now sprout in every student who sees themselves represented, in every teacher who reconsiders their methods, in every classroom that opens itself to something new. Clara's story no longer belongs only to her. It belongs to everyone. It even belongs to Mariana, a 12-year-old girl from the outskirts of town who saw the viral video of Clara's performance and decided she wanted to learn piano. She walked into a community school and, when asked if she wanted to try playing, firmly said, "If Miss Clara could do it, so can I." The teacher smiled, handed her the sheet music, and another story began. Because that's exactly what Clara did. Open doors. Or rather, she showed us that doors were never the limit. The real limit was the gaze of those who refused to see. Even the concerts changed. Now, before each performance, the conductor takes a few minutes to share the story behind the chosen piece. And in many of them, Clara is remembered, not as an exception, but as a living lesson. Because every great sound is born from a silence filled with meaning. And every great piece of music is, at its core, a story someone had the courage to tell with their body, soul, and everything they've lived. Walking through the conservatory's halls today, you notice something different. It's not just the new decorations or murals with updated biographies. It's the atmosphere, the way students greet each other, the way teachers listen, the feeling that the place is finally in tune with something greater, a new era, a new perspective, a new awareness. And to think all of this started with a mocking gesture, a challenge disguised as a test, a laugh meant to humiliate, that became the spark of a silent revolution. Clara didn't have to prove anything. She didn't fight for space. She simply took her place, with truth, with dignity, with music. In the end, Clara taught us something no technique can convey, that the most powerful art is not born from the desire to impress, but from the courage to be whole, even when the world tries to shrink us. That true transformation begins inside, when we choose not to respond to offense with rage but with presence, when we choose to touch instead of shout, when we answer with stories instead of arguments. And that's why the plaque on the wall still stands, simple yet full of meaning. It's not decoration, it's a reminder that listening with the heart may be the most advanced way to live. And every time someone walks into that room, they're not just entering a physical space, they're stepping into an idea, a memory, an invitation to rethink everything we thought we knew about talent, merit, and recognition. Clara is gone, but her notes still play, not in our ears, but deep within everyone who understood the message. Because in the end, what transforms us isn't titles or applause, it's the stories that remind us there is still beauty in being real, even when everything around us is just surface. Now tell me honestly, how many times have you ignored someone just because they didn't look talented enough? How many times have you crossed paths with someone quiet, simple, seemingly ordinary, and didn't even bother to look again? The world is full of extraordinary people disguised in anonymity, and the truth, though harsh, is freeing. Most of our judgments come more from our own insecurity than from any truth about the other. We project, we assume, and in doing so, we lose. We miss out on stories that could have transformed us. We overlook lessons that were right there, ready to bloom. Clara, for example, didn't fit the mold. She wore simple clothes, kept her head down, and spoke little. To many, she was just another companion at a conservatory that prized titles, medals, and impressive resumes. But all it took was one gesture, one touch on the piano keys, and everything changed. What was once contempt turned into silence. What had been judgment became reverence. And what was invisible became unforgettable. One of those stories that keeps echoing long after the applause ends. And the lesson Clara leaves us goes far beyond music. She reminds us that no one needs your permission to bloom. No one needs to be validated by outside approval to become who they were born to be. But you, yes, you, do have a choice. You can be the fertile soil that encourages, or the stone in the path that tries to block. You can be the mirror that inspires or the wall that limits. It all depends on how you see others, and more importantly, how you see yourself. Maybe your talent is still there, quiet, tucked away, silenced by years of fear, comparison, and self-sabotage. Maybe you believed them when they said you weren't good enough, that your time had passed, or that this won't get you anywhere. But the truth is, talent doesn't have an expiration date. A gift doesn't vanish. It only sleeps. It waits. And what it needs most isn't a spotlight. It needs courage. It needs action. It needs someone to say, "That's enough. Now it's my turn." And what if that someone was you? What if you were the next Clara? Have you ever stopped to think that there might be something inside you the world hasn't discovered yet? That your story is still being written? And maybe the most beautiful chapter is about to begin, if only you find the courage to turn the page. Because yes, it takes courage. Courage to try again, to challenge labels, to fail in front of others, to be authentic even when everything around you begs for conformity. But that kind of courage, that's what paves the road to transformation. Clara didn't wait for a formal invitation. She didn't ask for permission. She didn't need anyone's approval. She just went. And by simply being who she was, she made the entire conservatory rethink itself, not just its repertoire, its soul. Because when a deep truth shows up, it has the power to dismantle old structures, uproot prejudice, and shake stagnant traditions. That's what great stories do. They disrupt the order to bring meaning. And maybe, what the world is waiting for right now is your truth, your music, your gift. And that doesn't mean you need a stage or a crowd. Sometimes, transforming a single life already means transforming the whole world. Sometimes touching one heart is already a complete miracle. And what if that heart was your own? What if it's your life that's waiting to be touched back into its essence? Look around. How many people live on autopilot? How many have given up on dreaming? How many settle for emotional, professional, and spiritual crumbs? Not because they lack talent, but because they've forgotten they have it. Because at some point, they swallowed the lie that this isn't for you. And what if you were the spark that rekindles those dreams? The bridge between pain and possibility? You don't need a title for that. You need presence, purpose, a genuine desire to leave a mark, not out of vanity, but out of truth. And that's why this story matters so much. Because it reminds us that gifts don't die. They simply wait for the right moment to shine again. And when that moment comes, everything changes, not just on the outside, but within. We reconnect with who we are, with what we love, with what gives us meaning. And that's when life gains color, gains melody, gains soul. So, if this story touched you, do this. Pause for a moment. Look inside. What have you let fall asleep? What still pulses quietly within you but hasn't died? What still wants to be born, even if you've convinced yourself it's not worth it? Because the truth is, it is worth it. There's always time to begin. There's always space to start over. And the world needs, now more than ever, people who have the courage to be. If you felt that flame light up inside you, don't ignore it. Don't extinguish it. Nurture it. Protect it. Share it. Maybe you have no idea how much your own story can light someone else's path. And if the journey seems too long, just remember, Clara only needed one moment to change everything. One gesture, one touch, one presence. Sometimes that's all it takes. So if this story moved you, reminded you of something, or gave you that little push, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, share it with someone you know carries a forgotten gift. Because when we share stories like this, we do more than inspire. We build bridges, we heal, we transform. And you? Will you keep living on autopilot? Or will you start today to write your own story? With truth, with courage, and with fire in your eyes?